Why does my son have to suffer like this? It should have been you in that accident. Upon hearing her son, Brandon, had been severely injured in a traffic accident, mother-in-law rushed to the hospital, her face twisted in anger and tears in her eyes, shouting these words. It seems that while Brandon's life isn't in danger, the injury's location is problematic, and there's a chance he might end up paralyzed from the waist down. Brandon is still so young, how is he supposed to live the rest of his life with such a disability? I wonder if I can be the support he needs. I was in a mess of shock and anxiety when my mother-in-law shouted abuse at me, and I was struck as if I had been hit over the head. Since that day, my relationship with mother-in-law has only deteriorated, with her giving me hostile glares whenever we see each other. One day, about a year after Brandon's accident, he suggested we move in with his parents. Perhaps he was considering my workload and the care I provide. But contrary to what I hoped, what Brandon said next was totally unexpected. I don't want to do this to you, I want to live with my mom. What do you mean? Actually, The story Brandon told was so shocking, I felt dizzy and nearly passed out. You've been so dedicated to me, you would understand, right? They seemed utterly convinced I would agree without hesitation. To think that Brandon would make such a selfish demand, I couldn't accept it. I decided then to seek revenge against them. My name is Hannah. I was over the moon when Brandon, whom I had been dating, proposed to me, making me a 27-year-old office worker at the peak of happiness. He was introduced by a friend, a co-worker 2 years older than me. I felt that he was a wonderful person with strong decision-making skills, always leading the way in everything. After accepting his proposal, we began planning our wedding. That included house hunting, wedding preparations, and meeting each other's parents. Though balancing these tasks with work was challenging, the joy of preparing to start a life with my beloved boyfriend outweighed the hardships. My parents' greeting went smoothly, and next, we planned to meet Brandon's parents. Brandon had mentioned his parents were a remarried couple since his high school days, making him the child from my father-in-law's previous marriage. Though there's no blood relation to mother-in-law, they seem to have a good relationship. Mother-in-law, much younger than father-in-law, provides Brandon with a mix of parental and friendly advice, a confidant for anything. I was anxious about being accepted into such a tightly knit family, but my worries were for naught. When I visited to formally greet them about our marriage, my in-laws welcomed me warmly. It's so wonderful to have such a cute girl join our family. Hannah, we look forward to having you. If you ever encounter any trouble or feel uncertain, don't hesitate to rely on us. They said, welcoming me with open arms, and eased my nerves. They made me happy to join their mother-in-law. Brandon and I got married smoothly and have been living happily. However, our peaceful life came to an abrupt end about 2 years into our marriage, just as we started discussing building a home or having children. That day, as I was going about my usual work routine, I received a call from an unfamiliar phone number on my smartphone. Puzzled, I answered the phone, only to find out it was a call from a hospital near my home. Please, stay calm, the voice started, before delivering the shocking news. My husband, Brandon, had been seriously injured in a traffic accident. The moment I heard that, I was speechless, unable to comprehend the words. A traffic accident? Brandon seriously injured? My mind went blank at the utterly unexpected situation. I was snapped back to reality by the repeated calls of the nurse on the phone, and I hurriedly left work early to rush to the hospital where Brandon had been taken. By the time I arrived, Brandon's surgery had already finished. In the hospital room I was led to, he lay in bed, his body wrapped in bandages. The relief that he was alive, even if not unscathed, was fleeting. I was called into another room where the attending doctor delivered the cruel reality. Brandon had caused a single vehicle accident due to his own driving mistake, resulting in severe injuries. The surgery was successful, and his life was not in danger, but the injuries were such that there's a possibility he might end up paralyzed from the waist down. The moment I heard that, my mind went blank again. Brandon is in his early 30s. And yet, he must live the rest of his life in a wheelchair? Can I support him through this? With my emotions a tangled mess of shock and anxiety, I staggered back to Brandon's hospital room, where I found his parents, my in-laws, pale-faced. When they pressed me for details, I relayed everything the doctor had told me. As I spoke, mother-in-law's face turned red with anger, and the moment I finished, she yelled with a force as if about to attack. "Why does Brandon have to go through this? It should have been you in that accident." Mother-in-law yelled, her face twisted in anger and tears in her eyes. The intense expression on her face, so unlike her usual gentle mother-in-law, struck me like a blow to the head. After being calmed down by father-in-law, mother-in-law left the room saying I need to cool off and didn't return for a while. "Hannah, I'm sorry my wife said such terrible things. You must be upset too. She might say something again when she comes back, so maybe it's best for you to go home for today. You're looking quite pale yourself," father-in-law said, showing concern for me. Gratefully accepting his advice, I said, "I'll come back tomorrow morning," and left. Even after I got home, mother-in-law's words and expression haunted me. Her attitude seemed to scream that she truly despised me. Whether she meant it or not, her words had cut deep. I can't take my husband's injuries upon myself, no matter how much I wish I could. If that's the case, the only thing I can do is support Brandon with all my heart. With that resolution, I begged my boss in HR the next day to let me work from home. It was because I had time to care for Brandon. I must secure the time to look after him. It's up to me to earn for us now. With that single-minded determination, I resolved to support Brandon, both financially and physically. The money I had been saving for when we might have kids, I used it all to buy care supplies for Brandon. I decided to dedicate my life to supporting him. Alone in our quiet home, without Brandon, I made this resolve. A year has passed since the accident. Brandon has been discharged from the hospital and continues his recovery at home, with me balancing work and his care. My relationship with mother-in-law has remained strained since that day. Every time she came to visit my husband, she would glare at me. Meanwhile, my father-in-law always had words of gratitude for me. "Hannah, thank you for always taking such good care of Brandon. You have your own job to deal with, it must be hard. I can't thank you enough." Words like these from him always felt like a salvation to me. It seems mother-in-law is very worried about her son, as she visits him frequently. Brandon also enjoys his mother's visits, wanting to spend quality time just with her. Therefore, when she was around, I made it a point not to approach his room, going shopping or cooking instead. Then, one day, a shocking incident occurred. It was on a day she came to visit Brandon. As I was about to leave Brandon's room as usual, she unusually asked me to stay. "Wait a moment. Hannah, there's something important I want to talk about, please come into the room." "Oh. Yes, okay." I was surprised to be spoken to by her, let alone about something she deemed important. Entering Brandon's room with questions in my mind, Brandon and she exchanged looks before he began to speak. "I've been thinking, how about we live at my parents' house?" This sudden discussion about moving in with his parents came out of nowhere. We had never talked about living together before, so why bring it up all of a sudden? Thinking perhaps he was considering my workload, I quickly shook my head. "I'm fine, really. I don't feel burdened by our current life, and moving in would just inconvenience your mother and father." But the next moment, Brandon's response was completely unexpected. "No, it's not for you. I want to live with my mom." "What do you mean?" Confused, I turned to Brandon, who started explaining with a smile. Apparently, since high school when his mother remarried his father, he had been in a relationship with her. And when his mother came to visit, they would spend their time being affectionate with each other. Though they had been nurturing their love for over a decade, since Brandon and his mother were technically mother and son, marriage was out of the question. Having moved away from his parents' home after marrying me and feeling lonely over the years, plus becoming physically disabled after the accident made it so that his mother could only visit, putting a strain on her. However, if I agreed to live with his parents, Brandon could live with his mother, allowing them to see each other anytime. That's why he wanted us to move in with his parents. My husband's eyes sparkled as if to say, wasn't it a great suggestion? If you, Hannah, who have devoted so much to me, can understand, right? But keep this a secret from my husband, okay? It'd be trouble if he wants to divorce me. I was dumbfounded by their assumption that I would simply agree. The shock was so immense I couldn't find my voice. Unable to bear the expectant looks and the isn't it good, pressure for a response, I fled from Brandon's room. I ran out of the house aimlessly. The fact that Brandon and his mother had been betraying me for years, even before our marriage, plunged me into despair. If he loved her so much, why did he marry me? What am I supposed to believe? Tears streaming down my face as I ran, eventually, I was too tired to continue and stopped. Just then, I found myself near a park, so I decided to sit on a bench to calm down. As I rested there, taking deep breaths, I began to feel more at peace and remembered something important I had to check. So, that's what it was. After confirming it, I quietly resolved to get a divorce. At the same time, I decided to contact his father. Judging by mother-in-law's tone, it seemed he was unaware of their affair. I thought he had the right to know the truth, and that he should be informed. With that in mind, I invited father-in-law to a coffee shop nearby after his work. I'm sorry to bother you after a long day at work. Actually, there's something I need to discuss with you about your wife and Brandon. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, he encouraged me to speak. To him, I showed what I had confirmed in the park earlier. It was footage from a nanny cam I had installed in Brandon's room. I had set it up after he started recuperating at home, fearing something might happen while I was out shopping. This camera had recording and playback functions, as well as a two-way talk feature. Interestingly, I had only used it to check live footage when away, so Brandon seemed unaware of its recording capabilities. In front of father-in-law, I played back the video recorded by the nanny cam. It captured the moment Brandon proposed living together, their previous discussions about moving in, and even a kiss scene. Brandon and mother-in-law were mocking us, calling me and father-in-law clueless fools, laughing about how I, being so obedient to Brandon, would silently consent to their relationship and plans to live together. The footage I saw in the park was appalling, and it felt just as terrible watching it again. And that's why I want to divorce Brandon, I said, looking at father-in-law after the playback ended. He, who had been staring at the smartphone screen where the video had been playing, was expressionless. I see. Actually, I have something I wanted to show you too, he said, pulling out some documents from his bag. They were the results of a private investigation he had ordered on. Since the accident, mother-in-law had been going out more frequently under the pretext of visiting Brandon. He found it suspicious and wondered if she was having an affair. Given her frequent visits were true, the investigation documents likely mentioned it. Flipping through the documents, I found unexpectedly shocking results. Sharing the nanny cam footage and the private investigator's findings with father-in-law, we headed to the house where Brandon and mother-in-law were likely still together. As expected, they were in Brandon's room, being affectionate. Upon our arrival, they both turned pale and stiffened, realizing something was up. I'm back. Sorry, but I've told everything to Dad.
No! You can't possibly believe this, right? I love Brandon as a mother loves her son, nothing more. You're the only one I love as a man,
she said, forcing a smile. Father-in-law, giving her a cold look, replied, I've had enough of lies. I saw the nanny cam footage. I saw everything, how you two acted like lovers, and how you planned to deceive Hannah into agreeing. What? Brandon exclaimed, looking at the nanny cam in shock. Realizing he knew everything, Brandon and his mother began frantically apologizing.
I'm sorry, Hannah, Dad. I somehow ended up truly loving Mom. I knew it was wrong towards Dad, but I couldn't help my feelings. I'm really sorry. I do love Brandon, but the one I love the most is you. So, please forgive us. And Hannah, please keep being good to Brandon, okay?
Regardless of my husband, the apology from her felt like nothing more than an excuse, which disgusted me. Father-in-law seemed to feel the same, his face contorting with discomfort. Facing my pleading husband and his mother, I spat out my decision harshly. I don't ever want to see your faces again. I'll be divorcing Brandon. My statement left my husband speechless. Then, as though speaking on his behalf, she interjected. Divorce? Don't joke around. Who's going to take care of Brandon? She, showing no signs of repentance and snapping back, prompted father-in-law to sharply retort. You can take care of him. We're getting divorced, so you can stay by Brandon's side as much as you want. Divorce? Why would you say such a thing? Didn't I tell you I love you? She continued to scream, refusing to accept father-in-law's decision for divorce. Realizing that talking with them would lead nowhere, I quietly left to start packing, intending to leave the house. As I began to sort through my belongings in the living room, my husband's shout came from the bedroom, "Don't mess with me." Shocked by his outburst, I peered into the bedroom to find him, his face now flushed with anger, a stark contrast to his earlier pallor.
What's this about you having another man? Explain.
It appears that in my absence, father-in-law had shown them the detective's report. I, too, was taken aback by the detective's findings. Surprisingly, the report revealed that she had another affair partner besides my husband. According to the report, she met this man after my husband's accident, and she would use the excuse of visiting my husband to instead meet her lover 1 out of every 3 times. Father-in-law had begun to consider divorce upon discovering from the detective that she frequently left the house under the pretext of visiting my husband. However, if it comes to divorce, it might add an additional emotional burden to my husband, who is already suffering physically from the accident. He had been cautious, however, about when and how to confront her. But with the revelation of her affair with my husband, father-in-law saw no reason to hesitate any longer and decided to confront both of them with the evidence. She became frantic, desperately making excuses. But I was lonely because we couldn't be intimate after Brandon became disabled from the accident. I was planning to end it with him once Brandon got better. Her excuses only incited my husband's anger further. What? So to you, I was just a body?
No, that's not it. But that's a separate issue. What? Don't spout such nonsense.
Their argument escalated, father-in-lawing the house with their shouting. Leaving them to their furious exchange, father-in-law and I departed from the house. Subsequently, through lawyers, both Brandon and I, as well as father-in-law and mother-in-law, finalized our divorces. Once the affair came to light, mother-in-law's other lover vanished. Despite previously contemplating separation, Brandon, now divorced from me, realized he would be left without anyone to care for him if his mother also left his side. Under a promise of no further affairs, their relationship appears to continue to this day. Wanting to ensure he had a place to live, my ex-husband demanded the house in the property division. I readily agreed, having no desire to continue living in a house father-in-lawed with such memories. In return, I received a larger share of our finances and secured a significant amount in alimony. As long as we have the house, we should be able to live somehow. The living expenses didn't seem to cost much anyway. At his grand misconception, I couldn't help but smirk internally. Until now, I had told him not to worry, saying that we could manage the living expenses with insurance money, disability pension, and a little income from working at home. In reality, it was me working desperately to earn money, but he, almost always bedridden, had no way of knowing. Because I managed our finances, my ex-husband and his mother were under the impression that living expenses weren't much and thought we had financial leeway. In fact, I had been barely managing the significant living expenses with my earnings, and I was also the one repaying the mortgage. Unaware of this, my naive ex-husband and his mother must have thought that securing a place to live was all that was needed to be all right. However, it seems they began running short of money and started experiencing financial difficulties. They approached me for financial assistance.
Hannah, please. Lend us some money. You're actually making a lot, right?
Brandon can't work. Don't you think abandoning him after divorce is too cold? Fed up with their self-serving rhetoric, I simply stated, no, and firmly pushed them away. Rejected by me and apparently denied assistance by father-in-law, they attempted to apply for welfare under mother-in-law's name. However, she was still in her late 40s and in good health without any chronic illness. She was considered capable of working. Therefore, she was ineligible for welfare. Reluctantly, she started working multiple part-time jobs from dawn till dusk. I occasionally hear from a once close neighbor that she, now toiling away, has lost her former beauty due to exhaustion. Furthermore, I've heard that the relationship between her and my ex-husband has worsened, with frequent quarrels. During her absence, a young male helper visits to care for my ex-husband, and there have been sightings suggesting a suspiciously close relationship between him and her. Some speculate that she might be having an affair with the helper. Hopefully, it doesn't lead to another mess, but it's no longer my concern. Leaving their issues aside, after the divorce, I revived various activities I had given up on due to my husband's care. I enjoy shopping trips, overnight travels. And now that I no longer need to work from home, I've returned to working at the office. Though working from home was convenient, I missed interacting with colleagues, and returning to the workplace has been unexpectedly pleasant. When I was caring for my ex-husband, I always felt rushed to return home early, but now that's no longer a concern. Savoring the freedom to roam outside without any worries, I cherish my life more than ever.